Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, Pete.
Hey,
Hello,
Pete.
hello. I'm so excited to have all of you assembled worthies here. I think that this is going to be really impactful and educational for our audience. So for folks who are joining us, we're going to be having a roundtable discussion with a panel of tenured and very experienced and seasoned revenue operations leaders here, more or less on the topic of like how to be a successful revenue operations leader, as we kind of are calling it here, making VP of RevOps. So I'm really excited because obviously this is an emerging category of expertise. Obviously sales ops has been around for a hot second, but the notion of somebody who's like at the same kind of level of orchestration and resourcing as like a VP of sales and what have you is something that's newer in the last five-ish years or so. And so there's a lot of people who are thinking like, okay, like how am I going to be Kelly when I grow up, and how am I going to be Jessica when I grow up, or how am I going to be Ricky when I grow up? And we're going to talk about that today. So I'm super pumped to have everyone here, and it's really nice of you guys to share your expertise with the folks who are joining us, who are interested about how to be you when they grow up. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of introductions here first. And we can just pop to the next slide here. Oh yes, and for folks who don't know, this is being sponsored by Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software that helps organizations improve the performance of their sales teams through the smart application of data. Something that obviously revenue operations people think quite a bit about, right? And how to provide their managers and their leaders with leverage and really embed a culture of data-driven management. So that's a little bit on us. I'm Pete. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. So I spend my time working on our go-to-market parts of our organization. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And then subsequent to that, ended up starting Modern Sales Pros, and then also Atrium, wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales. And so that's a little bit on me, but more importantly, we're going to talk about our lovely guests here today. Jessica, maybe you can take a minute or two to share with folks what you spend your time doing at FMX, and then just like a little bit of kind of like your prior experience as a revenue operations professional.
Yeah, happy to. So my name is Jessica. I also go by JT. FMX is a company that does CMMS software for facilities management, primarily K-12 space, but we are kind of all over the place as well. So I'm the VP of RevOps. So our team essentially kind of handles all of the CS ops, sales ops, marketing ops, product ops, anything ops. We're a smaller company, so we also double as IT. So I know somebody earlier was talking about wearing multiple hats. So my team manages over 200 applications across the business. So, well, I say manage. Sometimes we just kind of say, yep, it's there. That's all we can do there. It's yeah, we still pay for it. But yeah, so my background, I've been in kind of an ops role for 15 years. Started out in higher education and was kind of handed a CRM that my team was going to be using, and really kind of thought this is an interesting piece of technology. Learned a little bit more about it, eventually was given complete control over it university wide. And then it just kind of went from there, got into SaaS and really never looked back. So, and was able to kind of make the leap from marketing ops to sales ops to rev ops over time.
There you go. Cool. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jessica, for joining us. Kelly, maybe you can share a little bit with folks what you spend your time on at Gainsight and the how you kind of got there.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this panel. I'm Kelly Jarrett. I head up sales strategy, operations, and enablement at Gainsight. And my career is a little bit different, I think, than JT's, which is funny. I also go by KJ, so we should maybe just call each other that. So mine's a little bit different. I mean, I think early in my career, I had a mentor that asked, what I wanted out of my career, and said you could kind of go two directions, right? You can be a specialist or you can be a generalist, and kind of described what that meant and what that looked like. And I actually specifically chose the generalist path, which means I've done a lot of different things in my career, rather than sort of focusing on one expertise or skill. Not that you can't do that in one function, but I have started in sales and technology, moved into customer success, was part of a services organization, then product marketing, business marketing, and now, and then sales enablement, and beyond that, operations. But even through that sort of varied career, I had a common theme of leveraging data to make decisions and prioritize what our team really was focused on for the greater good of the business. And that passion kind of led me to really appreciating the operations motion. Specifically for me, the go-to-market operations motion. So in my group, we do not currently have the CS operations. It's mostly sales operations. And I'm just really passionate about finding opportunities to help the company and our specific functions scale, be more productive, be more efficient, be more effective at their jobs. And so it's fun for me to think about how to leverage data to build the strategy for our sales organization, both now and kind of the future development of that group.
Nice. Yeah, I would imagine that having been a practitioner in all those different roles, marketing, sales, I can't remember if you said success, really help facilitate empathy and context for those kind of practitioners. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit more later on when we talk about best practices for partnering with those functional leaders and what have you, rather than just kind of being like the tail of the dog that's getting wagged by. Ricky, hello. Maybe you can share. Thank you for joining us, and maybe you can share a little bit about what you spend your time doing at Cyberhaven and some of the prior roles before that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for having me. This new role at Cyberhaven is just recent, just started in February. So where I spend a lot of my time today is just constantly looking at how much are we growing our ARR, and how much are we spending to get there, and then just constantly trying to maximize for efficiency and make sure that we're building a healthy business. So today, under my scope, I have revenue operations, FP&A, HR, legal, and a bunch of other teams. We're also a relatively small company compared to what's out there, and so we end up wearing many hats. I spent a lot of my early career in inside sales, and when I got to Nutanix in 2013, I came over as a first-time people manager to manage the SDR team, and then eventually branched into inside sales reps and then the renewal team as well. My boss at the time had responsibilities for sales operations in addition to inside sales. And so I noticed that he was a little bit resource constrained on that side. I've always been a math and science guy. So anytime I had an opportunity to help, I would just jump in. And what ended up happening was I was spending like 8 to 10 hours a day doing sales ops work as the inside sales leader, and then kind of neglecting my team to some extent. So we just kind of came to a logical conclusion that it would make sense for me to move over and start running the sales ops team, and then backfill the inside sales leadership job. A little unconventional because I didn't do any of the roles that were on my team up until I got to the point where I was leading the team. But over the time of inside selling, I had kind of built like a long list of things that as an inside seller, I would like have a wish list of things I wish I could change about sales ops. And so I kind of just started with the low hanging fruit and see if we could, fix and help, make things a little bit better for the sellers. And then, so that was good. It worked out well. And I was able to get some quick wins and be successful. But it took me a little bit to understand that there's a whole, it's not just about sellers. There's the company side to it, and you have to do what's right for the company. And so, it took me a couple months to kind of find the right balance, but so I like to consider myself sales centric, but I've probably crossed that line to some extent. And
gotta have a little bit of like sales prevention department.
Yeah, like, just a little
on top there. Just it
right.
really brings it together.
Yeah, I like to think of it as healthy friction.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's gonna be a theme that we're gonna talk about here. Well, obviously we have folks who have really amazing experience here, have a lot of context. different sizes of organizations. Cyberhaven's a little bit smaller right now, but obviously Nutanix was huge. Gainsight is obviously a very large organization, and then FMX is, I want to say it's like north of 100 people, right? So a good mix of sizes and what have you. I think the one topic I'd love to start out with is as as revenue operations staff, you can kind of just feel like surrounded by alligators, right? And just like constantly like putting out fires and what have you. And if you think about like where a lot of like individual contributing revenue operations people come from, oftentimes they're coming from a sales background, or they're coming from maybe a financial analyst background or what have you. But it's very much like that icy like doer, right? And also people have like pride in like doing. And it's funny, like as you guys were talking, I'm like, this is definitely not like a satisficer crowd. This is like a maximizer, optimizer crowd. And so like people get very excited, like that just tends to attract that type of human, who then get a lot of like satisfaction out of like, doing this automation and the CRM, or like building this report, or like, building this dashboard, or like doing this, like adding this field or what have you. And I think that's great as an IC, but when you kind of are glowing up, right? One of the things you have to do is move from kind of being reactive and people like blowing you up on Slack and or like filing tickets in Jira or Service Cloud or whatever, and kind of being more like initiative based and being more thoughtful about like, okay, cool, like we're not going to be, I have a 5-year-old, right? And he's starting to play soccer right now. And it's not like the little soccer player is just like running after the ball, right? Where they're like, actually, we're going to be thoughtful about like, we're not going to do this right now. We're going to schedule that for 90 days. We're going to schedule that for 120 days. And so I thought what would be useful is for folks to kind of talk a little bit about how you guys go about, moving from reactive to then like proactive and like scheduling out, prioritizing initiatives, figuring out like what the right things are for the business based on the constraints the business is seeing at that given point in time. And then like, and then arraying your resources against that. So maybe we just go around. I'll just kind of call on folks to direct things. So Jessica, maybe we can kind of start with you there. How do you think about the prioritization of like the many things that one could be doing in order to like figure out what the highest impact things are, and then like schedule that as appropriate with constrained resources?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something I think is just a constant balance and constant reevaluation process. I mean, the reactive stuff's never going to go away, but what's really helpful for us is when we get the reactive stuff to kind of make sure that we're solving for the base problem. Because a lot of times we can turn that into a proactive thing. So really kind of understanding, is this an enablement opportunity for us? Is this just a new field in Salesforce, or do we need to look at a process? So, when we think about reactive versus proactive, sometimes we're able to turn the reactive stuff into proactive stuff in order to kind of get in front of the next thing. So there's a lot of, there's just kind of a lot of like, pump the brakes. Let's actually look at what's broken, right? Like we might have gotten a, emergency Slack saying, I can't close this opportunity. Well, one, we're going to help you do it because we want to close that ARR. We want the bookings, but let's actually look at, what was your process? What were you doing? Yeah. And kind of figure out like, is this something everybody's going to encounter? Is this just a one-off? And kind of treat it like that. But I mean, the biggest thing for us is just making sure that we're not just putting Band-Aids and duct tape on stuff, and perpetuating, things that will ultimately break again. So whether it's a process or system or, even enablement, like I said, we really kind of try and get to the source of what's actually breaking. And that way we can really kind of turn it around and go for those improvements and kind of schedule out the things and say, okay, we know we're going to have, we know we have some seasonality in our business. So we know when there should be some downtime for us to work on, this project, whether it's, lead scoring or something like that. We can kind of say, let's get at the ultimate root cause, and then we can get to the planning part.
I like it. So the kind of heard like a little bit of like echoes of like 5 whys going on there a little bit, like, okay, why is this happening? Okay, why were you trying to do that to get to the root cause? Because then you can potentially identify something that's consistent across the organization and be like, it was silently doing a lot of damage. Okay, maybe prioritize this faster. And then also being aware of the like the rhythms of the business in you guys' case, because you do a lot of K through 12. There's, you know, we're not going to deploy CPQ or like, you know, do a bunch of like reskewing or something right in like the middle of like purchasing season, which I recall, if I recall correctly, was July and August is purchasing season for for high or for K-12. Nice. Okay. Kelly, I mean, you have a number of you know, things under your purview, like, you know, enablement, sales strategy, and sales operations. How do you think about kind of like the prioritization, or like the taking in the requirements from the business, and then kind of like the prioritization to make sure that you're doing kind of like proactive programs that hit those needs versus just being reactive?
Yeah. So Gainsight does a really good job of planning in a way that's simple, but also gives us an opportunity to really stay focused throughout the year. It's called a OPSP. It's a one-page strategic plan. It starts at the top. Each function has their own sort of supporting initiatives that supports those top line initiatives, and then it trickles down to each team. And so doing that and really putting in the time to do that gives us an opportunity to define what our priorities will be this year. And then if something is asked, because I know you'll be shocked to hear that sales leaders have strong personalities. If something is asked,
something in the meantime, like,
yeah,
one more, and by one more, I mean 2 more.
You got it. So if it comes up, if there's a request that falls outside of that strategic plan, it gives us an opportunity to say, all right, hang on, let's decide, is that more important? It's an even over kind of conversation. Is that important even over the things we already have on the list? If so, like, you know, we're not doing anything resource wise right now as our most SaaS companies. So we're taking the opportunity to really level set on our priorities and or evaluate whether something needs to come off if something is added. So that's one way we really do it. It also gets buy-in because everybody's aligning to that strategic plan. The sales leaders are nodding their heads, the marketing leaders are nodding their heads, and we have the opportunity to say, well, we said these were our priorities. Let's just make sure that we're being deliberate if we make any changes there. And the second small thing is we sort of built into my team a little bit of a check and balance. We've got one woman on my team who is process operations, and then another gentleman who works on data operations, and they're separate for a reason. So one is designing sort of the ideal process, and we worked on a new, you know, value selling methodology, and it's very specific and documented and targeted. And then the data operations person supports that. So if there's a need here, they always have to go here and make sure it fits into our process. If there's a process change, they have to go and make sure it fits into our data and data model structure and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit of an internal check and balance we've built too, that has definitely helped identify some concerning, you know, back and forth.
Yeah. And so what was the acronym that you guys use for your planning documents again? What was it?
OPSP, one page strategic plan, and it is literally one slide for each function.
So it feels kind of like OKRE or like V2 Money.
Yeah, similar.
And what have you, where it's like, hey, like these are the things that we're going to seek to do this year. We're going to like try to grow by this amount of ARR. Okay, how are we going to do that? Well, you know, we're gonna tackle, you know, this, like we're gonna increase our GRR and our NRR like this, and then these are gonna be the key enabling programs that sit underneath that. You know, we're gonna increase our win rate by this, and then like these are the key programs that are gonna sit underneath that, and then, well, you know, et cetera, and like, and so then presumably like that happens at the beginning of the year, and then you guys probably like, you know, sprint for 80 days or whatever, you know, through the quarter or whatever, do a quarterly checkpoint, be like, cool, is this working? Is it not working? Do we need to course correct, et cetera? Are we advanced? Like, where are we on those metrics? Did we do those programs that we said that we were going to do? Which ones are behind and what have you? And like, is that kind of like, are those quarterly checkpoints where you do that like horse trading, or is it in between, or what?
Yeah, it's quarterly formally, but we also have in our just weekly business review, we touch on different components of the OPSP so that you know, you never know when you're going to get asked, right, in a WBR what's up with your part of the OPSP, and so therefore you're always sort of staying on top of it. So it's a little bit of both.
Got it. So Ricky, as somebody who you know did did operations leadership, revenue operations leadership, and now has like, gone up a level. And it's funny that I spaced out and didn't I kind of missed your promotion there. Franco Anzini over at Lean Data also is the COO over there, and he used to lead revenue operations at Malwarebytes, and then prior to that at exactly, I want to say, if I'm remembering Franco's biography appropriately, don't ask me, it's my party trick. And so I'm seeing this pattern more and more, but now you have like even more stuff to manage, right, and prioritize amongst like competing stakeholders. How do you guys go, or like how have you guys gone about those like being more proactive and kind of like making sure that you're working on the right stuff that supports the business versus kind of just like reactive whack-a-moling?
Sure. Well, I think I can echo a lot of what the other panelists have said so far, but I really try to I look at what's coming in. It is a lot of firefighting and a lot of one-off requests, but the first thing, when I wake up and I look at all this stuff, the first thing I always think about is like, what are our core business objectives, and the work that I'm about to do going to align to those objectives. And then kind of secondary to that, just looking at all the data and the performance metrics that I have access to. Yep. And is that going to inform my process or not of what I'm about to do next? From there, it's really just then my internal plan of, okay, how do I tackle this? And again, just making sure that I'm using the insights and the data that I have, and making sure that I'm aligned to those business objectives. If ultimately, if what I'm trying to do doesn't align to those objectives, then usually it's typically just a breakdown in communication.
Right.
So then the next step from there is really just make sure that I'm communicating and collaborating with all the stakeholders to make sure that we're aligned, and that ultimately the work that's going to happen is actually going to contribute in a meaningful way, and we're going to continue to move the ball forward. So that's kind of how I think about almost everything that I do every single day, and then it's like just a constantly,
it's like a meta framework, and then the things fit in there.
Yeah, and then I'm just like every single day I try to evaluate and reiterate what we're doing, and it doesn't make sense. And a lot of times the company is changing drastically. We're because we're not like a huge company. I think we're just getting to like 100+ employees, so every 6 months it's a completely different company. I mean, we're at the point where even one strong personality joins the company, and it fundamentally changes the culture of the company. And so it's nice. It's like, I'm constantly, working for a new company every 6 months, and it just forces me to keep evaluating and reiterating on what we're doing. And does it still make sense? I mean, what we did from 0 to 5 million ARR made a lot of sense. Doesn't make sense anymore. Now what we're going to do from 5 to 25 is completely different. Yeah, I mean, it's there's always going to be those one-offs that you have to tend to, and a lot of times it's just a lack of documentation, or just some things that we cut corners on to just get by another day. But as we continue to grow and mature, we're constantly fixing those solving for the technical debt that we created.
Yeah, that's right. One thing that kind of comes to mind as you were talking about like this recursive process of like I'm working on this thing right now, or like one of my staff is working on this thing right now. Is it driving towards the goal, right? If it isn't driving towards the goal, why is that? Like, do we have different definitions of the goal, or whatever, to get articulated poorly? And like as I was listening to you, and that was popping into my brain, I couldn't help but think about one of my favorite books. It's called The Goal, which is a process engineering book written as a novel. So for folks who are joining us, if you haven't read The Goal, it's a novel about a gentleman who like runs a factory, right? And I forget exactly what they're manufacturing. It's like widgets of some sort of capacity, but it's very similar to what we do as revenue operations professionals. Is like tend to the factory, right? Like tend to the factory, and always be. But what the goal is like is ARR growth, or revenue growth. And so we want to like reduce costs, we want to reduce inventory, we want to ramp up the amount of like of revenue that's coming out, and then like in the pursuit of that, there's going to be like little hiccups and what have you. And so just as long as we're constantly like looking back to that North Star and then cascading back, we'll be in a really good spot. Ricky, you had a really cool point there about strong personalities, right? And so I think another thing that a lot of times junior revenue operations folks kind of like hits them is when you're like a revenue operations manager or what have you, like you maybe report into the VP of sales or the director of sales or whatever, and you're like kind of this internal vendor. It's like, here, quick, like fetch, right? Like go do this, right? But then as you elevate, right? Now you're like partnered with the VP of sales, the VP of CS, right? The VP of marketing. And, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if everyone's read the Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, but where it becomes really important, really important for you to be partnered well with like those that VP of marketing, that VP of CS, because like you're kind of like the connective glue. Like they have requirements for you, but then also you're this glue that's like making sure that the VP of marketing isn't screwing up the VP of sales through bad leads or bad lead program or whatever, or like sales is not closing bad things. That's like then screwing up CS's situation, because again, you're like in the middle, right? It's like healthy friction. So what I think one thing that would be really useful for us to chat through really quickly is like how do you facilitate those relationships with those other executives where you're not like, hey, Jessica, go fetch. And you're like, haha, I'm not in the fetching business. I'm your peer, right? I think it would be really, because like that's a big mindset shift for a lot of folks. And especially when you're getting promoted initially, it might be a little trepidatious. So maybe Jessica, we could kind of start with you and like how you've navigated that and those partnerships with like, the VP of marketing, the VP of sales, the VP of CS, et cetera.
Yeah, I'd love to. So this is a topic I'm pretty passionate about, and I've been lucky over the years to work for different leaders who honestly kind of propped me up and made me realize that I had that seat at the table. And I think that was the thing for me that really helped. I actually consider myself a strong personality, so everybody around me is pretty used to me just kind of speaking my mind and blurting out, hey, this, we need to change this. But what I think really helps is obviously having somebody in your corner saying it. But what kind of, I think, worked for me personally also is, RevOps, it's been around now, it's kind of buzzy, but there's still a lot of people who don't know what it should mean at a different, at your company, at, different places, which can be sort of a benefit because, in some ways you can kind of mold it to whatever you need and the unique perspectives that you're going to bring or your team's going to bring. So one of the things that helped me kind of get on par with the rest of the executives at FMX was I created a team charter. And I said, this is the way that I will be working with you. And I dictated it. I just, I worked directly for the CEO, and he gave me that, opening to kind of say, how do you want to run this? And I said, at first it was, I was like, oh my God, I don't know. I could take this so many different ways. And how do I make sure that they don't hate me, right, for owning these systems or owning these processes? But then it became, if I start by educating them on why I'm here, which is not just to sit there and point out all the things that don't work well, it's to actually help facilitate the things that do work well. Ricky, I'm also a huge fan of that positive friction phrase. It's, we're not doing things just to make sales' life harder. We're doing things to improve the outcomes and to help them, have that repeatable, scalable success. So for me, it was really kind of saying, this is why I'm here, as as a function, as a team, as the goal to help FMX move forward. So really kind of making sure that everybody understood where I stood was the first thing in really helping to build those relationships with marketing, with sales, with CS. And it really worked out well, this last time around for me to kind of, oh, okay, they're here to do what? And, JT's here to kind of push everybody forward and to be that voice of reason sometimes.
Right. So it's like, here's my charter, like, this is why we exist. Here's kind of the menu, right? Like in general, right? Like, this is what we cook. This is not what we cook, right? So like, don't ask us for these things over here, right? And and I think that's probably pretty important, especially if you have like folks coming in from, that don't have like prior conceptions of like, sales operations, like sales ops, comp, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Comp. Right. Versus like, no, RevOps, it's like all these different things. And like, we will do that thing right there. But, because we have all these other things that we're working on too, we're like, probably might be a little tough for us to like refactor your comp plan, like, every 4 weeks or something like that. Right.
Right.
I like that. So Ricky, how have you, especially now as a member of the C-suite, how have you gone about facilitating these relationships? Obviously, you came from a sales leadership background. How have you facilitated those relationships and that kind of like healthy tension with the kind of those peer stakeholders that revenue operations partners with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I'll speak to it from the RevOps side, because this new role is just so short term for
You're
me.
figuring
So,
it out.
yeah, more experience on the other side. So, I mean, very similar to what Jessica said, just really establish some clear goals and objectives, make sure that you over communicate. And then, you really just have to lead by example and demonstrate value in the relationship, which means proactively finding areas for improvement, or where you can facilitate revenue growth without them coming to you and asking for things. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I also think, to some extent, I mean, the burden of this shift hasn't really been solely just on our side of the fence. The modern day sales leader, CX leader, marketing leader has also evolved, where they truly view this as a partnership. I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to go to a company to find a traditional sales leader where they expect the operations function to just kind
They
of
exist. We run into them.
Yeah, I'm sure there's still some out there, but that mind shift has really shifted, I think, in the
God
last
bless.
years. And a lot of the people that I've worked with, they view this as a true partnership. That I don't have to justify that to them. They already have that mindset, and they want the data. They want to make good decisions, and they also don't want to make decisions alone. They want to feel like
Sure.
that it was a group decision, because then if it's bad, at least they're not in the boat alone. So yeah, I think it's been an evolution on both sides. But just like Jessica said, it's really just establishing those clear goals and making sure that they're effectively communicated.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a tailwind. So like everyone's been doing a good job of like community education, right? Like of functional leaders, but good to have a charter, right? A menu, right? This is what we do here. These for folks who may not be. Kelly, you're in a particularly interesting slot because you functional leader in like a variety of these different roles, which is like, I mean, like that's awesome and a cool superpower. Probably, unfortunately, not everybody. It's probably not a super common case, but it's like a cool superpower if you have it. It probably positions you very well to like speak marketing to the marketing leader and speak CS to the CS leader and what have you. How have you kind of facilitated those relationships? Also, I guess Gainsight's also kind of cheats too, because Gainsight has just like this amazing corporate culture that that I imagine kind of makes things smoother. But like maybe folks can kind of learn from what makes Gainsight so special and apply that at their own companies.
Yeah, I mean, having been a practitioner in each of these functions is a huge benefit. I'm not going to lie. It definitely gives you credibility, whether that's due or undue. It gives you immediate credibility. So that part for me is luck, right? That's lucky. But it doesn't have to be that you've done the roles. I think the big thing is you just have to really listen, like active listening. Put yourself in their shoes, use empathy. A lot of people will talk about sales organizations as being like, the golden children or whatever. It's not that way. I mean, a seller is a hard job and there's a lot of stress, and there are things that you have to think about and do that others don't see. And so even if you haven't been in that role, there are ways you can really learn empathy. And I think that's critical, because if you can use that empathy in how you communicate with those leaders, I think that helps a lot. The other thing is, the culture at Gainsight is incredible. I feel very lucky to be there. It's a culture of transparency that comes from the top. Nick, our CEO, he sends a Sunday newsletter to our staff, and it is extremely transparent about his life, about, any current challenges in the business, in the industry, how we're going to approach them as a team, what he needs from us. I've never seen anything like it before. And it builds that transparency culture. So that's also the way we work together with our peers, right? So like the head of marketing, for example, our CMO, she's very open and willing to hear things that aren't going well and things that are going well. And we work on them together. I've been at companies before where it's very much like they're promoting the good things in their functions and hiding the bad. Yeah. And that doesn't happen at Gainsight. So I would encourage more of that transparency. I had a conversation with a VP of demand gen the other day. We sat down and I said, before we go into this data conversation, I just want to make sure that we're going to talk about the bad. Like, let's start there, and not hide anything, whether that's from sales side or from marketing side. And he agreed. And that's what we did. So that's really important. It's also good, I think, just in terms of showing not only transparency, but also bringing something to the table that they otherwise wouldn't have, which is also a really key component. So for example, RevOps, we became part of the Vista family. And when that happened, a lot of it was reporting to the board, reporting the news, right?
Yeah.
Leaders don't find that valuable. They want what's wrong, what's going well, and how do I make that repeatable or solve that problem? And so ever since the organization kind of shifted under my group, we've been really working hard to do more of that. We have what we call pipeline conversations. That's like, here's what I'm seeing. Tell me what you're seeing. And it's very like back and forth and open. And what's the data telling us that could be leading to good or bad? And it's us bringing news that otherwise the leaders wouldn't have. So that's another key component. We're really trying hard to orient around.
Yeah. Got it. So in terms of like takeaways for folks to potentially do here, it feels like the charter is, pretty helpful, right? So folks can be like, and so it's probably pretty simple for if folks want to do that like at home. It's just like, hey, here's my menu, here's my SLAs, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I would recommend to folks is, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, obviously it's more focused at the E-staff level, but I think you can fractal it down as well. And you can say like, hey, Kelly was talking about this as like good and bad news. And the reason why it's important for you to tell me the bad news is because then I might have something in my brain that I can use to help you fix that, right? The concept that in 5 dysfunctions is they call it team 1. Right. And so if you imagine the go-to-market team as being team 1, and the VP of marketing, the VP of sales, and the VP of customer success are all just one linear revenue function there, as a team together, maximizing ARR, right? Whether that's net new ARR or, expansion ARR or prevented, churn or whatever. It's all ARR, man. It's all ARR, right? And so each of those folks has an impact on that. And this person down here can potentially, change something up here in marketing land in order to facilitate that. But you can't have that if you don't have that good alignment and communication. Kind of changing gears a little bit here. Another really big change for folks who are progressing in their RevOps career is going from being that superwoman or superman who can do all the things and I'm really good at reports and dashboards and I'm awesome at Excel and I'm also awesome at flows and automations and I'm awesome at this and I'm awesome at that, to now I got to have 2 people on my team or 4 people on my team or what have you. And so now I have human resources. And even though I'd be yeah, you know what, here, just give me the stick, right? Give me the steering wheel. That's obviously not high leverage. And probably not dissimilar to sales, sales leader, a high quality seller going from being a seller to a manager. And so that's one piece of resource management, resource allocation. And then another piece is, pure budgetary resource management as well, right? Human capital management and then capital management. Maybe we can talk a little bit about navigating that change as well, as a leader, where you go from being superwoman, superman to having a bevy of people that you're responsible for making more successful, and you're more responsible for the output of the team. Kelly, maybe we can kind of start with you, because I think you have a number of sales operations people, revenue operations people under your team right now, but also enablement as well, if I recall correctly. Maybe you can kind of speak to how best, you manage that, manage those human resources and make sure that they're lined up against the right priorities and delivering and measuring that they are delivering in the way that, those peers expect.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of operations working very closely with enablement. I think that we've tried in the past to roll out any plethora of operations, dashboards or reports. And without the enablement side, a lot of times they'll fall flat or fall short. And the enablement, our enablement team, which is what I was actually brought into Gainsight to build, which was my first job role at Gainsight. It's funny. It's an operations role. It's to scale the sales organization, even though a lot of that is done through skill training and knowledge sharing and testing and certification. It's still with the same goal in mind, and that is to scale up and make efficient and effective our sales organization. So for us, it was really important, I think, for those two groups to work hand in hand. Do they have to be in the same function? No, but in our case, it works. So I do think that that's important. In fact, we're just getting ready in the next couple of weeks to roll out, some new dashboards. We're called them AIR dashboards, activities, indicators, and results. It's basically a leaderboard of sorts that we're going to leverage Atrium for. So it's exciting for us to be able to have that. That previously might have just been given to the sales leaders and hopefully they would know how to use it, right? But we know that that's not always the case. So we're combining an entire curriculum to really get those sales leaders doing the things they need to do. We're giving them the 5 things you should do every Monday. And then what should you do throughout the week to have better conversations with the reps that are falling short? So I think that is really important in our organization and how we make our team more effective. With that said, everybody still needs more resources, right? And we could do so much more with more, but we're all constrained, I would imagine. Maybe not, and that's great if you're not, but we are. And so because of that, again, it's just priority setting and using that data to really focus our enablement and focus our operations on the right things.
Yeah. So in this case, we have human resources that are focused on the continuity of a program that's been prioritized. So operations might be a more operationally minded person might be focused on the creation of that reporting or that dashboarding asset or whatever the data assets are. The enablement human in question is responsible for taking that and then operationalizing it, right? Actually deploying it and making sure that people are able to leverage it in a thoughtful fashion, and then authenticating that that's the case. Jessica, I'm trying to recall how large the RevOps team is at FMX right now, but maybe you can speak a little bit to building that team and how you separate responsibilities and kind of measure the outputs of your teammates.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're currently a team of 4, including myself. So we've got somebody dedicated to marketing operations, sales ops, and then revenue operations manager. And we kind of fold CS into that. So that team actually, when I first started at FMX, it was myself and another. And so we've really been able to kind of scale based on really just saying, hey, we can help more here. We can help more here. And kind of slowly taking on the responsibility. And then, once you kind of prove the worth, the budget conversation, the headcount conversation is a little bit easier, right? When you say you could have this if I just had more, one more resource. But we kind of purposely structured them to be SMEs in one general area, and then they can also be generalists and kind of cover each other, because all of RevOps, it's all a funnel. So it's really important from my perspective for everybody to really understand the way that they're working with each other. So my marketing ops specialist is kind of also moonlighting as product ops, because that's just going to benefit her from the marketing ops side to be able to to see better data based on just understanding the product ops side of things. So they kind of have their primary responsibilities and then build forward, but it's always a very collaborative, with a team of 4, it's very easy to work together on stuff and to kind of stay up to date on what everybody's doing. But really, my job is really just to make sure that they, they have what they need. I am so used to being a player coach, and that's something that, building out the team, I don't have to be anymore, but it's still kind of where I enjoy getting my feet wet every once in a while. But it's also recognizing that, I do actually have to balance the strategic stuff and, the planning and things like that. And I can't do that if I'm, constantly building reports or things like
Your
that.
reports, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I need a break from it, from the strategy, I can go back down, and that's
Yeah.
my kind of fun, like
It's
relaxing.
like your personal reward. It's like,
It
oh,
is, yeah,
my brain is tired. I'm gonna make this report, and like
yeah.
remember how like elegant it is to just be interacting with like a SQL database as opposed to messy humans. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But I mean, it's really fun for me as a leader to kind of see everybody have their aha moment, and as you said earlier, kind of not to just do what's asked of them, but to really have them stop and think, why are we doing it this way? Or like, what are we getting out of it? So something that I really encourage my team to do is if they're handing over a report, talk about what you're seeing in that report. Don't just give somebody a report and let them look at it. Kelly, you mentioned, we hope that, the reports that we give sales are adopted. We know that there's just a lot of things in front of the sales leader too, right? So if we can give them that little bit of extra, like, hey, I saw this. Is that something you want us to dive further into? It's the quid pro quo thing, is we can help get us to that next level, but we've also given them something that says, oh, this dashboard's really important, right? So I need to pay attention to it. So then we're getting something that we want out of it too.
Yeah. So it sounds like at your scale of organization, we have individual subject matter experts tied to the different piece, like the different part of the funnel, marketing operations, sales operations, CS operations. But we want to make sure that they each speak each other's language enough to be able to kind of like temp, or at least like understand what's happening up the funnel or down the funnel from them. Ricky, I imagine at Nutanix, the revenue operations function was not small, because like it's pretty meaningful sales organization. Maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about structuring a team at that size, and kind of like how you did resource allocations, how you kind of like partition those resources up to support the business, and then we can end on that.
Sure. I'll be super candid with you. I mean, I think I made a lot of mistakes there. I mean, when I left the company, we had 150 people in revenue operations. And that's just I think some of that was a byproduct of just the complexity of the sales motion and the pricing, and a lot of internal kind of complications that we created. But also to some extent, my contribution towards just having a unnecessarily large team was that I kept designing jobs around specific people, and then I kept designing workload and what the tasks that those people would do around the people they supported, which just fundamentally, I think, wrong. And so when I left the company, it took a little bit of time to self-reflect and say, I really need to be thinking about what's the business trying to achieve. Then what's my team's contribution to that? And then what are the roles that I need on my team? What's the skill set of each role? And then go find the best people to fit that, so they can do those jobs. Because that to me, that's the only way that it can be scalable. I constantly found myself in a situation where I kept designing jobs around people, and then also the people they support. But then, once a company gets to 5,000 people, those people are constantly in and out. It's just a revolving door of people. Right. And so I was constantly having to just change, and it just made my life that much harder. So the way I think about things now is just, business objectives come first. What's my team's objective, and how do they align to those? And then what are the individual responsibilities on the team that I need to support that, and then make sure that I find the right people to fit in those. But it's constantly reassessing the workload within those different profiles, and then is it manageable or not, and then just communicating openly with finance and accounting, and make sure that we're staffed to the right level. We used to adhere to like these ratios, like industry standard, like sales ops should be like 20-1 or something like that to sales. But I think some companies could go 50-1, and if it's super complex, then maybe you're only 10-1. So I don't think you can use those benchmarks anymore. You really have to make sure that you're just optimized for your current business.
Yeah, sales motion contingent. Yeah, I think that's a really good insight there. Like, I don't know, we've got some like VP of sales in EMEA, and like, he's super needy and So like, all right, well, like maybe I need to get him his own artisanal sales operations manager. And then one way to almost kind of think about that, kind of to our conversation at the very, very beginning about like whack-a-mole versus proactive and like design centric. In this case, like we're whacking a mole. It happens to be a leader, and the way that we're going to whack that mole is with like a human, which is probably like not a great like way of doing resource allocation, versus like the system. Like the phrases that we use that show up quite a bit at like Atrium is like playbooks and like systems and harnesses and things like that. And so in this case, it's like, here is our human capital harness, where because we have a non-complicated velocity sales motion in general, we're going to have an expectation we're going to have like these ratios right here. And when we add when we add 4 more managers, I'm thinking of like DoorDash or like Yelp is popping to mind or whatever. Like then we pop on a new sales operations business manager and our business partner, and like they're right here on Jessica's menu, and like these are the things that they provide. And now it's just like plug and play. Kind of we see this with some of the large organizations we work with at Atrium, where sales operations is thinking about like, what is the managerial playbook, right? Like, what is the recipe? It's like, okay, cool. We just added a new manager. We just added 3 new managers in APAC or whatever. And like, here's how you run your business. Here's the metrical assets associated with it. And of course, sales operations is the one kind of like in partnership with like sales leadership, is like designing those like swim lanes and that recipe, but it is designed, right? It's not just like willy-nilly and what have you. And then, you make updates to it, like maybe on a quarterly basis or maybe on a yearly basis, but like, you're not just like hacking around on it on a recurring basis just for funsies, right? Not being reactive. So I think this was, I could continue to talk with you guys forever, but obviously you have way more important things to do than like geeking out with me. But this is super impactful. I think all the, all of our revenue operations friends out there who are thinking about how they can be like you when they grow up, probably like have gotten a lot of really great things out of this. And I think we'll be able to share some of these kind of key takeaways with folks. I think like the proactivity and like design thinking, I think is something that kind of cascades all the way through this conversation, whether it's like program execution and then partnering with folks in order to elicit those requirements and actually maybe share that, like reveal those requirements to them, not just like elicit them from them, be like, hey, I think you might be thinking about this, and then just making sure that your team and budgetary resources are going against those prioritized things. So this is super fantastic. I really appreciate everyone joining us. I appreciate you guys joining us, and hopefully everyone had a great time.
We did.